שלום לכם וברוכים הבאים לספרייה הלאומית שבגבעת רם בירושלים. כאן שמורים כמעט כל אוצרות התרבות שלנו, פלאי פלאות של יופי ושל עניין. תנו לי לספר לכם על נשים ופמיניזם. נתחיל דווקא מעברית. מלחמת השפות השתוללה בארץ בסוף העשור הראשון ותחילת העשור השני של המאה הקודמת. סביב פתיחת הטכניון פחות או יותר. אבל לא רק המדע והחינוך היו שדה קרב, כל תחום בחיים היה זירת קרב. למשל, אופנה. בעלת מדור האופנה הראשון בעברית המודרנית הייתה חמדה בן יהודה. אשתו השנייה של אליעזר בן יהודה, היא חתמה על המדור שלה בשם שושנה לבנה. למדור האופנה הזה היו 3 סיבות לקיומו. הראשונה הייתה לאסוף מנויות לעיתונים של אליעזר בן יהודה, לא רק מנויים זכרים, אלא גם מנויות נקבות. הסיבה השנייה הייתה, כפי שחמדה הגדירה זאת, להפליץ את הרבנים, לזעזע את הממסד הדתי, והם אכן התחלחלו מהרעיון שכותבים על אופנה בשפת קודש. והסיבה השלישית הייתה להנחיל את השפה העברית לנשים, לגרום להן להיות יכולות לדבר על ביגוד ועל לבוש בעברית, ולא בצרפתית או אנגלית או גרמנית או כל שפה אחרת. הכרזה שנמצאת לידי, שנקראת תלבושת אישה, לא חוברה על ידי חמדה בן יהודה, אבל יש בה 60 פריטי לבוש של נשים עם שמותיהם העבריים. שמות נפלאים ומצחיקים כמו חך, בית הנפש, מכבנת, כל מיני דברים שלא משתמשים בהם כיום, אבל רוצים לראות ניצחון קטן של עברית? רק שליש מבין 60 המונחים אינו נמצא בשימוש. 40 בהחלט תפסו. ועם ביגוד, שימו לב לכרזה הזאת, לבשי בגדי תפארתך. מאיפה זה לקוח? קודם כל, פעם היו עושים כרזות שלקוחות מן התנ"ך. אז זה לקוח מישעיהו נ"ב א', אורי אורי לבשי עוזך ציון, לבשי בגדי תפארתך ירושלים עיר הקודש, כי לא יוסיף יבוא בך עוד ערל וטמא. אבל הכרזה הזו היא כרזת גיוס בנות לצבא הבריטי. בנות מארץ ישראל לצבא הבריטי במלחמת העולם השנייה. 3,500 פחות או יותר התגייסו ושרתו כמכונאיות, אחיות, נהגות ארץ ישראליות, הן אלה שהובילו את החיילים לחזית לקרב אל אלמיין השני, וכאן בכרזה שלנו הלכו על התמה של הביגוד. בואי, תעתי מדים יפים, אפילו לשרבולים יש בטנה, ואם אתם רוצים לראות איך זה נראה במציאות ולא בכרזה, ראו את התמונה היפה הזאת, מכונאית מטוסים ארץ ישראלית גאה, לובשת בגדי תפארתה. מה שמוביל אותנו כמובן לדיון בפמיניזם, ואת הדיון הזה אני רוצה לעשות ברשותכם באוסף הספרים הנדירים של הספרייה הלאומית, כאן בגבעת רם, נעשה את זה בלחש. אני רוצה לחשוף בפניכם פריט נדיר שאין כדוגמתו, סידור שלם מכל השנה. הספר הזה נכתב באיטליה ב-1480 עבור אישה רמת מעלה, אבל בואו נחזור לרגע אלינו. נכון, אצלנו כיום יש דיון בחוגים פמיניסטיים מסוימים על ברכת השחר, האם ראוי שגברים יגידו ברוך שלא עשני אישה, בעוד נשים נאלצות לומר ברוך שעשני כרצונו? כבר אז התלבטו, 1480, תראו מה כתוב בסידור שלנו. ברוך שעשיתני אישה ולא איש. חבר'ה, לא המצאנו כלום. כל אלה ועוד אלפי אוצרות נמצאים בספרייה הלאומית בגבעת רם, בירושלים. אתם מאוד מאוד מוזמנים.
Hi everybody, good afternoon or good evening or good night, depending on where you are on the globe. It's really good to see you. We're going to be starting in just a few seconds, so get settled. I see people are joining. So we're very excited to see some returning learners here, and we're really looking forward to this session. We also have with us Shlomit Naim-Naor. So as we're still in the gallery view, she can wave to us so you can see who she is. That's Shlomit. And with me tonight is also Dara, who works with me at the library, and she's under the Learning NLI title. So if you need in the chat, if you need any help or any questions, she'll be taking questions in the chat box. And as usual, we'll try to pause and some points at the session and voice some of the things that are written in the chat. So without further ado, we're going to get started. And here we go. Today, our session is about the International Women's Day and also the transition of Yom Ha'Em, or Mother's Day, to Yom HaMishpacha in Israel. And we'll see that these 2 or 3 dates are intertwined and connected and have a lot to say about women in Israeli society and in the Israeli calendar. So like I said, we'll be talking about these days in the calendar. We'll be experiencing some creative writing with Shlomit, and we'll see how we can use that as a reflective tool for ourselves as learners, but also for our students. And we'll talk a little bit about what to be mindful of when we use that in the classroom. And we will also actually be touching upon another subject which has to do with teaching history and literature, which is using a timeline and how important that can be for making sense of either historical events or of a narrative in a story. And we'll see a little bit about how we can use a timeline in our teaching. What I would like for us to do now for just a moment is, before we dive in, we saw this short video. Some of you watched it now with us together, and some of you hopefully watched it as preparation for this session. We'd love for you to write in the chat box just your general impression. How did that video make you feel? If you learned something new, if there was something that sort of stood out from your point of view, and maybe we'll voice 1 or 2 of your comments just to sort of get an idea about what you thought about the video and of the items that were presented and the way they were presented.
Sorry, Shubi, we've just lost your video. We've just lost your video. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure that you.
Okay, so I'm saying.
But we can hear you fine.
Okay, so in the chat box, if people want to just write what their impression was from the video, and it's something that we just want to get the juices flowing here and to sort of start thinking about when people talk about women and feminism and, you know, ancient times and modern times, what has changed. Just saying a few general comments if you have about the video. I'll stop sharing now, just so that we can give people a chance to write in the chat box. And this way I can see. So someone commented here, Becky, that it's odd to have a man presenting this topic. And it's true, this is part of a series that was done for the NLI, but it is a little awkward seeing a man present this topic specifically. Someone also wrote about the wording of the blessings, that it was so long ago. And I guess that's something that bothered women way in the past. So the chat can keep on being active and you can keep on writing your comments. And in the meantime, we'll move on and just keep these thoughts in mind when we, as we continue into our session. Okay, so a little exercise we'd like to do is using a Padlet. We've created a timeline. This timeline summarizes some of the things that were in the article I sent you in advance, and also a few other landmarks or milestones in the process of Mother's Day, International Women's Day, and all these events that happened in different places in I would say the past about 100 years. What we'd like for you to do is you can either scan this with your camera on your phone if you don't want to leave the screen of your computer, or Dara can share we'll share in the chat box a link to this Padlet, and we're encouraging you to go into the Padlet and add to our timeline something that's of some kind of significance to you, maybe a memory or something that's related to this timeline. In a second, I'm also going to put the Padlet on my screen as well. So hopefully everyone can open the link and share with us. Okay, so as you can see, this is our timeline. I'm just going to be scrolling. You can each see it in your own link to the Padlet. This whole issue of having a day, an international day for women, or Mother's Day, they actually both started out around at the same time and towards the end of the 19th century. And we see that there are different milestones in this process. So again, I'm encouraging you to write your own personal memory or something that was significant along this timeline. It could be a childhood memory. It could maybe be something you remember about an important figure that was significant for you. And again, you have this link and we can continue to add to it as the evening goes along and also at a later date. You don't have to feel obligated to add your piece, but I do encourage you to read the different snippets that are on the timeline, just so that you get an idea of how these things progressed in different places in the world and in Israel as well. And once we have that, I see that someone wrote that their grandmother was born in Poland in 1919. And again, I'm encouraging you all to share different things that are relevant to you on this timeline. In the meantime, moving forward, we should be asking ourselves, I think, if we're talking about International Women's Day or Mother's Day, which day really celebrates and empowers women? And I think one of the first questions that many people ask is, why do we even need a day that's dedicated to women? I mean, if women are 50% or maybe more of society, what is the meaning of having a special day to celebrate women? And why do we need that? So again, just like looking at the history of these days, International Women's Day, which is on March 8th, probably started with a very strong connection to socialist movements and to looking out for workers' rights and women as workers as well. And one of the mythological dates about International Women's Day is the burning of a warehouse and a factory in New York on March 8th, which most of their employees there were women and girls, actually. So it sort of came together with this fight for human rights and for workers' rights. Then we have Mother's Day, which again has a different kind of timeline, but not far off when it comes to the years that it's starting to develop in the world. And you could even say that there's a clash between International Women's Day and Mother's Day in the sense that Mother's Day is really representative of more of the bourgeois, you know, the mother, the housewife taking care of the kids and the role of a mother in the family. We see that in Israel, Mother's Day is actually celebrated on Hanukkah for many, many years. Today, I don't think as much. Actually, I've spoken to a few people as preparation for this session, and people who are from Haifa really have a vivid memory of this day actually being on Hanukkah, and it's like a very special part of their identity as people who live in Haifa. But in the rest of Israel, it's actually celebrated on the date that Henrietta Szold passed away. Here, there's a debate as well, and you'll just notice that just like other dates we've been talking about in prior sessions, there's always a debate and there's always a controversy. So even here, because Henrietta Szold passed away in the evening, so is it the 30th of Shvat or the 1st of Adar because of, you know, the Shki'ah, because of the sunset? There's a debate whether or not it was Lamed Shvat or Aleph Adar, even that. And again, in Haifa, they never celebrated on that day in any case. And then this whole concept of Mother's Day also transitions into something new, which is called Family Day today in Israel. So we'll get to that as well. I just want to point out that none of these days have any historical or religious background in the roots in Judaism. It's not a Jewish holiday that sort of became a modern version of itself, but rather something that was adopted over the years, and again, more or less the last 100 years. So let's talk a little bit about Henrietta Szold before we dive into some writing exercises. So Henrietta Szold is called the mother of Israel, the mother of youth, the mother of the Yishuv, even though she never married and never had children herself. If we're looking at her own personal timeline and who she was, Henrietta Szold was born 1860 in Baltimore. She's the eldest of 8 daughters. I don't think that's a coincidence. The way what she became and what she started doing in the world. And really, she's a very, very impressive personality, and really someone who's done a lot for teaching. And as you see, she was also the first woman to study in the JTS and elected to serve on the committee of the Federation of American Zionists. She's a very impressive woman who did a lot. At some point, she also decides to come to Israel, and that's when she's appointed to be the director of the Youth Aliyah, and that's what earns her name, the mother of the youth, or the mother of the Yishuv. Something I just want to point out is if we're talking about timelines, when we look at the dates, of course, a lot of these dates are very, they stand out. You know, World War I, World War II, this woman really lived through a lifetime of a lot of turmoil in the world. She was born the same year as Herzl. And she, just so that we can sort of get some kind of context of the time that she lived in. And I want to point out one detail that was mentioned in Sally Berkowitz blog that I sent you. I'm also going to send you in the end of this presentation. We have the link to it. She wrote a letter to Chaim Peretz, who actually volunteered to say Kaddish for her mother when she passed away. And it's a really interesting letter. There's a link here in the presentation. I really recommend looking at it, saying, you know what, it's a really touching and moving thing that you want to do for us as a family of girls who supposedly can't say Kaddish for our own mother. But in Judaism, women are exempt when they cannot perform something in Judaism, but if they can, they should. And she takes it upon herself. So it's a really interesting thing to see that in 1916, we're talking more than 100 years ago, that was her opinion, and she was very adamant about that. So we're going to start with our first writing exercise, and thinking about the timeline and all the things we've been talking about. Shlomit and I, when we talked before the session about women and mothers in Judaism and also in modern day Israel, a lot of the matriarchs had trouble becoming mothers. And Shlomit will talk about it in a second, once I pass it over to her, about also a lot of the main female figures in the beginning of Israeli culture and Israeli literature. So I'm handing it over to Shlomit now. And I think it's just an interesting insight to think about when we think of motherhood and women in our culture. Shlomit.
So hi, good evening. It's great being here. A few thoughts to begin with. First of all, my mother was born in Haifa. And in our family, it's a must. We have to call our mother on the 30th day of Shvat and wish her a happy Mother's Day. She's from the generation that had all those big celebrations at the Mother's Park, the Mother's Garden in the center of Haifa. And that's a must in my family. So that's just to pour some personal perspective on that very day. I recommend you not forgetting to wish my mother happy Mother's Day. Disaster. The second thing, the Jewish Matriarchs, we call them the Anbaron. They prayed to have children, and they all had. But in Israeli poetry, Leah Goldberg, the poets Chel, Zelda, Miriam Lynch-Tekelis, and Yona Volach, this is a more modern one, they did not have children. Most of them were not married. So we don't have a nusach. We don't have the form of motherhood and whatever has to do with raising a family in Israeli poetry. It's not something that we can refer to. There's no text written by Israeli poet that we can bring to those events. And that is a place I want to begin with, in creating our own nusach, our own sort of mythology, ethos, you can call it, of our families. So we'll take 7 minutes to think about moments that are connected to our family. and to think about the presence of our mothers and try to reflect why are those moments so memorable, and what are they for you, and try to capture how they're reflecting on who you are as an individual and also on your family. For example, I am a daughter of my mother. I'm married to my husband. I'm a mother of my daughters, but I'm also individual. And I take place in all those different family circles as the wife, as the daughter, as the mother. So let's try to capture a moment, an experience that we went through, and try to crystallize that and think about who are we as individuals and who are we as part of our family or families. And let's try to write a free paragraph based on these moments. The time now is 3:16, somewhere across the globe. Let's take 7 minutes and of writing until 3:24. If it's not clear, I'm here at the chat to elaborate. We have 1 more minute. So please, if you want to read, start editing and sort of shaping your piece. And those who want to read, write your name in the chat box, please. You don't have to share, only if you want. Okay, great. It's 3:24, and we had a short writing exercise of trying to capture a moment that has to do with the way we see ourselves as individuals and as part of our family. And Hannah Dichter, would you like to read, please?
Oh, Hannah, we just can't hear you if you want to unmute.
Okay, I'm just going to read a few lines of a poem that I've been editing for months. And I'm part of a group of women who started counting the Omer together, and we're still counting every night. We count the days.
Wow.
The blood in our veins contains remnants from the ancient days of goddesses, from the dimly remembered days of idol worship and talismans and the many gods of love, war, and wisdom, from the days of the red blood tents, from the days when the ancestral Avot had more than one wife, more than one concubine sanctioned by law and custom, from the days when each moon cycle was noted and celebrated, and when the Imahot and their sister wives had their own holy day holiday, from the days of mayhem and slaughter and migration, and women rent their garments and counted the dead, and we are still counting them. From when counting the memorial candles meant not more light, not more enlightenment, and not more wealth, but more dead to count. And that's the first paragraph. And I started editing it again because my niece, who's 32, out of the blue sent me this invitation to this women's Rosh Chodesh event that she's now part of. And I was just so blown away because we've never had any discussion on anything, and now we're talking about like why and that. So this all kind of fits in. And as you know, in the U.S., we're involved in deep discussions about who counts in this society and who doesn't really count. Thank you.
It's beautiful, Hannah. And as you were reading, came to mind that Efrat Mishori, an Israeli poet, she has a poem about imahut, which is motherhood, of course, but imahut is also lack of essence. Mahut is essence, and is the negative form. So motherhood is also the lack of essence. And in your poem, you're really overflowing the essence of motherhood. You're adding another source and the moon and the red tent and counting and so many things that we have. And there's like a beautiful dialogue between this idea of overflow, which motherhood can be, and lack of essence, of what Efrat Mishori brings to mind of imahut.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that, really.
Thank you. They're so powerful. Thank you.
Thanks.
Do we have another person who would like to share? Okay, that is fine too. What I
Okay.
recommend you to do is go over those moments and add the date of today. So you'll have this as sort of a memoir of where you were at regarding these issues. So for next year, you can see, have you changed where your thoughts are? It's a good way of self-care and mapping our own thoughts.
May I interject? Alba
Sure.
Toscano from Valencia, Spain. I hand wrote my little ditty here, and I'm not even sure I can read my handwriting, but may I read it? Oh, goody gumdrops.
Sure, please
okay,
do.
So, okay, here goes. My mom's mom and dad were brick and mortar people. They were plasterers. They were nuts and bolts and paint. They built hotels in Florida after World War I. They built Apple Valley in California after World War II. My mother worked in a hardware store for the 2 years before I was born, and I attribute that to my everlasting, enduring love of hardware stores and hammers and turpentine. My grandmother thought that the vote for women was the stupidest idea she had ever heard because she thought that most women were just plain idiots. My mother, on the other hand, never missed an election day. We always celebrated Mother's Day on Tu B'Shvat, I think mostly because of the wood, and because it was close to Beshlach, which is the Shabbat when we read about the song of Deborah and the song of the Red Sea. On the day I was born, my grandfather planted an apple tree, which is a very traditional thing to do amongst Belgian French families. And when I was 7 years old, we transplanted the 7-year-old sapling to our backyard. And it was a very nice apple tree. And we ate the apples off of it. That's it.
Thank you, Alba. It's fascinating what you have here. You have the apple tree, the tree of wisdom. You have all those bricks of building society and building a world. And that is such a big part of your lineage, of your maternal lineage. Thank you so much. It's a beautiful memoir. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. Wow. We're going to move forward to another exercise. As you know, and a lot of you have been to prior sessions with us, the National Library is full of many, many treasures, not only books. And today what we're going to do is we're going to explore some of our sources and use them as inspiration for writing. So our next exercise really focuses on a few really beautiful items from the library, which I will show you shortly. And don't worry, I'm going to show them all, but we're going to also share a presentation that you'll have a link to and you can look at in your own time when you need it for your next exercise. So we're looking at a few items. One is this beautiful picture of children coming to congratulate their parents. Again, it's a family scene with children, a mother, a father, a home, possibly right before Shabbat. I'm moving on to the next item. Again, you'll have this in a presentation that you'll have access to in a moment. This is, of course, from a Happy New Year postcard, a Rosh Hashanah postcard. Here too, we see a scene in the home with the family, mother, father, boy, and girl, doing a kaparot right before Yom Kippur. Here we have a really nice retro advertisement for gas stoves. And of course, it's addressed to women, and it says, every woman's dream is a gas stove. A nice vintage advertisement. Here we have a segment from a newspaper from Davar in 1948. If you'll notice, the 2 pages are flipped. The sentence is Rabot Banot Asu Chayil, and it's flipped because of the way it was scanned or taken, photocopied. And it's many girls have acted with valor, and it's from Eshet Chayil, from the book of Mishlei. And here we see women who are fighting at the lines, helping build and fight for the early state of Israel. And here we have a photo which you might recognize from our piece that we put on for this session on Facebook and on our invitation. And it's a picture of new Romanian immigrants that came to Israel. Also a very family kind of in the house scene, a photograph. So this is our next exercise, and I'll let Shlomit introduce the instructions.
So let's think about this as inspiration. Let's take one of those primary sources and try to see which one is interesting, which one sort of like trickles our fingers and our thoughts, and write a letter to your mother inspired by this image. Or you can think about this as a postcard that she might receive, or sort of include this as part of a frame to the letter that you want to send, if you could, to your mother. Really use as sort of a springboard into writing. Will take another 7 minutes. If you're done, let us know by adding a heart to your frame. To add a heart to your frame, you go to reactions and choose a heart. The time now is 10:35. We're going to write until 3:35. We're going to write until 3:42. let's take one more minute before hearing from you, and those who would like to share, please write to us in the chat. Okay, it's 10:42. This is an example for an exercise that we have to be very sensitive with, and take in mind to begin with that some people might feel safer not sharing. And that is really okay, because a lot of the writing that we do, it's not in the purpose of other people to hear us and be our audience. It's for ourselves. It's for self-care, for self-management, for uh, writing down our thoughts and our memories. And if nobody wants to read, that's really cool. That's okay. And, you know, among women, we can always say it louder and louder that we are here to break the rules, and whatever we want is stronger than any other um, advice, comment, rule, or instruction that we were exposed to. So it's really okay if nobody wants to share. If you still want us to hear what you wrote to your mother, that will be really cool. We also have to be sensitive with our students that not everyone has a mother. Some of them belong to new families, which is also part of the idea of Yom Ha'Em, of Mother's Day in Israel. Because as Shuvim, now it's like a massive spoiler, Yom Ha'Em in Israel became the family day. From the Mother's Day, it's Family's Day. And we have to be sensitive because not everyone has a mother. Some families have one father or two fathers, and we have to accustom our audience and be very sensitive how we phrase our questions, of course. Later, I'm going to share with you something that I wrote. So it's going to be a circle of sharing. So it's safe, and you can feel really cool with any decision that you're making. I hope I haven't torn the whole session, Shuvi, with a spoiler that it became Family's Day.
Not at all. Yes, indeed. We also, I hope that some of you read the article before and you saw that there was some discomfort in Israel when Mother's Day was continued to be celebrated, and you know, as families have changed over the years, there really was a big there was a movement to say that, you know, it's not appropriate maybe to only give space to the mother in the family. We have a father, we might, like Shlomit said, even have two fathers, and we really need to rethink the way we relate to family, what a family consists of. Many families, you know, the structure of the family is very different. Some children are raised more directly by their grandparents and not their parents. Some people have other situations of different combinations of a few families, and you know, everyone has their own structure these days, and it really is important. And I think on that comment, there are a few things that we really do need to be sensitive of when we're writing with students, especially about such a personal topic and something that might raise a lot of emotions. You know, there might also be children who have suffered loss of parents, and definitely, I'm sure a lot of people here can also relate to that. You know, it could be a very, very sensitive topic. So maybe we'll just point out a few things to be mindful of when we're writing with students, and just a few things we thought about. And of course, you're all welcome to add more things in the chat box. I think one of the advantages of writing with students is exactly that, giving them this framework to reflect and maybe even process some of the things they're going through. And like Shlomit said, they don't have to share. It's a really personal thing, but we do need to be sensitive. One of the things that we also thought of when we were planning this session is the time consideration. I mean, we say to you, you have 7 minutes to write. Is that too much? Is that not enough? How do you know, especially on Zoom, an online session like this, it's really hard for us to see your faces and to know where you're up to. Are you ready to you know, are things, you know, are you processing and writing and everything is very productive, or are people just sitting and staring at their screen or at their piece of paper, or you know, just waiting? We don't know. So you have to think about giving it enough time, but also sort of limiting the time. So we talked a little bit here also about the process and processing and how important that is. And I think, and Shlomit can elaborate on this a little bit more, maybe about how writing isn't something that just happens in a 10-minute segment of time. And it's something that has to do maybe with a skill or something that we want children to maybe practice a little bit more. And of course, there's a lot about the dynamic in the classroom. Do they work together, the students? If they're young students, do they write something together? Do they share with each other? How much does the teacher guide this process, or is it a totally personal, individual process? What do they do with the products? How much are we pressuring them to share? What if you don't want to share, and how does that feel? So Shlomit, maybe give us a few kind of insights from your work with students with writing. And again, if people want to share more thoughts or questions in the chat box.
I used to have a lot of thoughts about that, but then COVID-19 came and they changed all my thoughts, and now I have new thoughts. And the whole idea of writing and sitting down to write has changed dramatically. Most of my writing classes now are through the Zoom. It's not sitting around a nice table and having eye contact and having some coffee and having a break. It's sitting with these small boxes, seeing each other. So my first tip for creative writing through the Zoom is you can hide your self-view. And once you do that, you're a much better teacher and you're more attentive to your students. You know how to do that? Do you see the small square with the 3 dots on the right side of your own photo, of your own face on the screen? So if you click that, you have hide self-view. Once you hide yourself, you don't see the other people. And when you do that, you're more attentive to the group and you don't see yourself. You're not focused with your hair, with your fingernails, or with your mimics. You're just viewing the class. So my first tip is go to hide self-view. So you'll be more attentive. So you'll be able to see where your students are. And once you do that, it's not about yourself. You're not seeing yourself. You're seeing your classroom. You're seeing your students watching you. And that small shift makes a big difference once you teach. You're less aware of yourself and you're more aware of your students. If you do want to see yourself, you go to any screen, you press the 3 dots, and then you have the option show self-view. And then you can see yourself again. So my first tip is hide your self-view so you can focus on your students. The second tip is try and use their own experience as a springboard into the writing. So for example, we are now on the 2nd week of 2021, right? Those of you that have cried since the new year, please raise your hands. Okay, so now we can see who cried. So we have some kind of intimacy, right? Those of you that read an amazing book since the beginning of 2021, raise your hand, okay? So we know that Shuvi did not read any great book, but Carrie did. So now I can ask you, please rename yourself to the name of the book you just read, okay? And then instead of the names, we're gonna have the titles of the books. And that creates a whole different atmosphere. That creates an atmosphere of a library, National Library, right? And it creates a different way of intimacy and getting to know your class. And once you do that, you get a different feel of the class around you. So these are really small tips of how to begin a session. With groups that I go for, you know, I have a group now that it's their third session, but it's a second cohort, so it's not really a third session. So with them, we have really deep conversations, and I have to set barriers. And setting barriers is very important. And as Shuvi said, not everyone has to read. In the past, it used to be that if you're part of a creative writing group, you have to read. Everyone has to share. So I'm suggesting no. You can share if you want to, but everything that is happening in the group stays in the group, so we're all gonna feel safe about what we write. And the question of the product, what is the product? Are we gonna have it on Padlet? Is that gonna be shared onto Google Drive? Are we gonna send each other through the WhatsApp group that we have with our virtual class? What are the products gonna be? And that also really helps our students to understand what kind of writing. And as you see, we said it's going to be free writing today. It could be a poem, it could be a memoir, it could be whatever you want to bring to you with you to the table. Another tip is reflecting and sort of processing on what participants have shared. And for example, when Hannah and Ale and Victor and Alba read, I sort of went through the main pillars of what they wrote and what they read, and I reflected back and gave them some feedback. And we do that because our students want, those that share, they also want to hear. They want to feel that people were listening to them. And this point is really crucial, because if I wrote something and I'm not sure and I'm taking a leap and I'm reading, I want someone to say something about what I read. And this creates an atmosphere that and the next time more people are going to read because they feel safe. They know what kind of comments they're going to receive, and they know how to handle that. And personally, I believe in creating a nurturing feel to the group and adding as many layers of inspiration as possible. And that could be done in many ways. Shuvi and Dara offered here this amazing slideshow with all the postcards and all those posters from Israel's from the National Library, from NLI, that you can use for inspiration. But for example, the map behind me is also from the map treasure of the library. And that also gives you inspiration. Let's say you're doing a session about maps. So here it is, you know, this is also a way to bring an atmosphere. There's a beautiful poster from one of the factories in the beginning days of Israel that I use for some of my workshops, and people entering the Zoom see behind me this massive machine, and it really feels we're on the floor, on the grounds in this big factory. And that really brings the feel. And nowadays, when we're doing it from home, it's much more appropriate and brings the whole narrative much more than the backdrop of the red curtain behind me. So that is another point that we'd like to take into consideration. What is the setting of a classroom? Because if we had a classroom, whether it's in the JCC or in school, we will know how it's going to be decorated. But here at home, we can decorate by ourselves through the backdrops and the screens that we have behind us. And that is another tool of bringing our audience into what we're doing, of creating a more holistic approach and background to our session. And the last tip is always to thank people, because they came to your session and they wrote and they chose words and they were sweating and they were doing the thing that they don't usually do. So I want to thank you all for writing and being part of this. We're not finishing now. I'm just showing you how important it is and how we feel better. So thank you, Blinda and Carrie and Karen and Netta and Veditas and Alba and Ilana and Sally and Cheryl and Anne and Alba and Shuvi and Dara. We're doing this, we're a small group. We can use this to really call out people and make them feel better, because they took the time and they made the effort and they deserve having their name read out loud. And that is something we really lost in the Zoom experience, because we talk to the 5 more active and we try to, and the rest are like, we might not call their name out. So this is really important to create this kind of like, they were here. So they chose not to put the camera on, that's fine. But I want to recognize and thank them for being here with us tonight. And that was my last tip.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. We have a couple more minutes. So if there are some questions, maybe Dara, if there's something in the chat box that we want to maybe voice and we can maybe address. And like we promised, there's also a poem for dessert, which we'll read in the last minute of the session. So questions from the chat box, anything or any comments? Okay, so what we'll do is now we'll read a poem by Shlomit. Shlomit, you want to read it or you want me to read it?
I'll read it.
Okay, great.
Where are my glasses? Here. Okay.
I just want to point out that just like in any other presentation, this will all be uploaded to the website. And you have here a few helpful links. One of them is also to the blog that I mentioned before, and one is to a digital game that we've created based on a WITSO poster, really interesting, about women's roles, and we really recommend looking at it and sharing it. And here is the poem.
Sorry, before we finish off, we just do have one question from Hannah for Shlomit, if you have any suggestions for gratitude exercises.
So I will start that with a moment of breathing and meditation, and ask people to think what they're grateful for in their lives, and give them an exercise of automatic writing, without moving, without lifting the pen from the paper, and what they're just write down what they're grateful for, and then ask them to put that either through the milestones of age, what I was grateful when I was 7 or 17 or 27 or 37 or 57. And that is one option. And the other option is to go with a acrostichon of the ABC. I'm grateful A. I'm grateful B. I'm grateful for my appearance. I'm grateful for my breath. I'm grateful because of the cookies. I'm grateful because of the dust, for example. And try to make this into a form, because otherwise it could be all over the place. So either through milestones through life, or through something that is holding that as maybe years or calendar or the ABC. And if that's cool, I'll move on to The God of Lost Rice. This was translated by Rachel Korzim. Every evening I collect the uneaten rice balls, from the little table in the living room to the corner of the kitchen marble top. Every evening I have to bend down and pick up wet, sticky, gray crumbs. I will throw those too to the God of lost rice, God of untidy homes. Perhaps the offering will be accepted by the force of daily generosity. since we know only too well that she will not eat such a quantity, and why am I trying to make her eat by force? And when will you stop breastfeeding already, they say. It is not I who needs to stop here. It is she. Only the baby girl and this warm, soothing breast, which is finally useful. What do I care? That she's already a year old and does not like this rice anyway. It too needs to be thrown into the bin along the dream of a big family, a real tribe, or the dream of a walk-in cupboard with a place for shoes, or at least folded laundry and a peace of mind. How can you concentrate when you need to make a doctor's appointment and the carpool? And it's time to go to that Pilates class already and buy milk substitute. And what can I ask from a God from whom I'm collecting rice bowls, presenting them meekly? What can the God of lost rice do that you cannot?
Thank you, Shlomit, and thank you, everyone. And happy Mother's Day.
Thank you, guys. I studied with Rachel Corazine at Pardes a couple of years ago, so that felt really nice.
Yes.
Don't usually know the Israeli poet. What a brilliant woman.
She's
Brilliant woman.
amazing. Yes. Thank you so much.
Toda.
Yeah, it
Toda.
was a pleasure.
Stay safe.
Yes.
Nice to see you, Shuvi.
Nice to see you too. Bye.
Take care. Bye. Bye, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so
for
much.
this evening. It was fun.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.